Nihility is a fraud. What do you mean by that, Zenny? Let me explain. On paper, Nihility Path's main job is to inflict debuff. If you're really bad at team synergy but have basic knowledge of team building, it's usually a DPS, a buffer, a debuffer, or a sub-DPS and a sustain. Heck, even Jingliu's Biz team was with Bronya and Pella. Back in the day, Nihility can be split into two. Supportive role, where it's defense threat, vulnerability, rest threat, whatever, or even damage, which is basically DOT. There's really no other options for damage Nihility. This later evolved into a bunch of gimmicky shenanigans like a detonator, an enabler, a DPS, yada yada yada. It's basically a cheaper version of Remembrance. Yet in most cases, without counting gimmicks, you're better off with a Harmony character. Let's take Exhibit 1, Acheron. While Acheron is a strong unit, back in the day at least, she needs another 2 Nihility characters. And these 2 Nihility characters gave her a whopping 60% damage increase. What?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
At first, it seems fine. We got things like Pella and Blackswarn, or even Pella and Jiaochu, but players later realized that it's far more efficient to ditch the second Nihility for a Harmony character instead. You still gain 15% damage increase, plus extra stats depending on said Harmony. This became more apparent with the introduction of Tribi, or even E1 Tribi if you're like rich, I don't know, or even Sunday and Danheng PT duo. Let's take the latter. With Danheng PT, you gain roughly around 500 to 600 attack, which then enables Sunday's quote-unquote better skill, which gives Acheron 80% damage increase, not to mention Beatified, where she gets an extra 70% crit damage. All these extra stuff is so much better and so much more worth than 45% damage increase plus 2 different vulnerabilities. With good speed tuning and ignoring entering combat stacks and enemy turn, in case you have Jiaochu, you can gain around 5 to 10 stacks per MOC cycle, which means you can ult more with Acheron, which means she's back! Acheron aside, let's see Super Break. Do you need a Harmony here? No. While Runmei is good, with the introduction of Vidalia, she's pretty much just a if you don't have this, you can always rely on her type of character. Not as good as Bislot, but you can still full clear. Hopefully. But I digress. Does Fugan Dahlia do Nihility things? Absolutely. One inflicts an extra weakness, but she kinda uses her skill on an ally, so she's like a borderline Harmony, while the other just spoils the whole gimmick.
You can now do Super Break without breathing.
Like what? Let's start with Fugue. At first glance, there's really nothing with her as a Nihility character. You get Defense Shred if a Phoxian Prayer ally attacks, Defense Shred on Technique, and a whole new gimmick, which is the extra weakness bar thing. But if you word it slightly different, like a bit different, it's basically a Harmony character. You target an ally with a skill, Harmony, ally gains Phoxian Prayer, a buff. Phoxian Prayer ally ignores 20% defense. Quote unquote buff. You see what I'm trying to say? You see what I'm trying to convey here? But inflicting means anyone in the team can benefit it. Yes, and you're correct. That's why I said she's borderline Harmony. She feels like a debuffer, but her gameplay whispers in my ear saying she's a buffer. But in reality, she's just an enabler for Super Break and leaves Harmony MC open for Team 2. In case you're feeling, zesty, you feel like you wanna double Super Break, This is probably me nitpicking at this point. She still does her job, and she has a spot in this team, so whatever. Dahlia, however, is the pinnacle of your own work biting your ass. A tree of meta bears fruit of this utter failure of a design. To be fair, this is something normal in a gacha game. You create a gimmick, you give the gimmick some QOL, then straight up ditching the gimmick. In this case, Super Break is now a glorified crit without relying on crit stats. This also means you can slap a bunch of break effect on a character, slap Dahlia in the team, and your damage is consistent because crit rate is out of the factor. Even better if you can somehow manage to balance out crits and Super Break damage. But I doubt that duo damage type is stronger than prioritizing one. But why does this happen? This is because all of the endgame content is can I clear this fast enough? And Super Break requires a whole lot of setup to deal damage. It's pretty much a 0 or 100, which is kinda lame. And for Dahlia, she isn't a QOL for Super Break. She's a privilege. You don't need setup, and you don't need to do anything. Just deal Super Break. Just press E with Dahlia and you're good. Yes, Super Break is annoying to deal with, but the beauty of it is finally seeing that white bar disappear and a whole bunch of numbers start to fill the screen. There's nothing much you can do about this, since the game is really just 2 buttons. So yeah, things like this will eventually come. It's inevitable. But anyway, is she a flawed Nihility? Well, kinda. She's like Jiaochu For Super Break, she deploys the zone, defense shred on ult. Yeah, I'm guessing the zone itself is the debuff, but she's more of an enabler than a debuffer, but it still fits the Nihility criteria. I don't know, I'll let it slide I guess. With these two Super Break units, Nihility might end up as a Super Break path, the same way Hunt at a time where they were like the follow-up attack path. Speaking of follow-up attacks, here comes the demigod of trickery herself, Sifera. And oh my, Finance is just a sub DPS. Does she debuff? Well, yeah, 1, she inflicts Patron, which is just target for the follow-up attack, and 2, on skill, she reduces the main target's attack by 30%. 30! Non-skill 30! No matter what level is your skill, it's always gonna be 30%, which is kinda dumb, I think. And her ult deals
True damage!
This is like Akron all over again. However, her Mother Cunt aura debuffs every enemy on the field, which makes them receive 40% more damage. A decent debuff. But she's another fake crit Nihility with an insignificant debuff, and her role is basically to just secure a kill. As a unit, she's great, good scaling, the ult has its clutch moment, but is she really a Nihility character? Attack reduction may be functional, or perhaps, I don't know, no sustain, but its value is not as much as res or defense shred. Sure, you could survive an extra hit, but for an Euphorious patch character where you have like, I don't know, Hyacinth, Danheng PT, fucking Adventurin. If the weakened state reduces defense, then maybe she's a bit more of a Nihility character. Right now, her current state is literally a sub DPS, nothing more to it. All the way down to her gameplay. You're not focusing on inflicting something, you're more focusing on the killing. I don't really have a problem with DOT for their aspects of nihilism. Each DOT character has a role. I do, however, want to complain about something similar to Dahlia, which is DOT becoming a glorified crit. Due to the fact that the game has only 2 buttons and 10 cycles before Xandar starts yapping about his goon cave. But this whole topic is for another time, I think. I'm not gonna yap about, how the meta changed and how the game is dysfunctional, but whatever. Most DOT characters are a good example of Nihility characters in my opinion. Most of their attacks inflict something or at least one DOT, one instance of DOT, and they have a specific role to make the DOT stronger, which I really like. Look at Sampo. Sampo increases, DOT damage on the ult. Kafka detonates, and I think Gwyneth detonates as well, and then there's Hysilence where she's just on ult, you just deal DOT. I don't know if she's more of a detonator or an amplifier, but whatever. Now for the time you've been waiting for.
Nihility characters that feel like Nihility characters.
We got Pella, Silverwolf, Jiaochu, and Wilt. They have a traditional yet unique way of conveying the arts of nihilism. The ever-confusing 30-year-old blue-haired teen Pella. She shreds defense on ult, she has Eyes Rest Shred on skill, and she can use that Luca LC, whatever it's called. But every Nihility character can use this, so I'm cheating. Silverwolf of the Stellaron Hunters. Weakness Implant and Res Shred. The blind healing cook of the Yaoqing Jiaochu. Inflicts a special DOT that makes them take increased ult damage and triggers on enemy turn. Really good for Acheron. The motherfucking legend himself, Wealth Yang, slows down enemies and imprisons them on ult. These are very traditional and very simple concepts of debuffing enemies. I'm not trying to say that Hoyo cannot do any creative things with the path. I'm just saying we need more viable debuffing units. Now it gets to a point where Nihility is a niche gimmick more than a debuffing gimmick, if you know what I'm trying to say. You only have 2 characters that shreds a specific element to, that it wouldn't work nowadays, but I'd love to see more useful / unique debuffers. I think a good way to make them great again is to scale the debuff with stats the same way Harmony buff scales with stats. It doesn't have to be super powerful or like overpowering, but make it just enough so that Harmony doesn't take all the spotlight. I'm trying to say like this debuff scales with your effect hit rate or something, so at least it gets stronger with your relics, but then there's a lot of like RNG involved with relic farming and stuff, so not a good idea to be honest. I still think it's hard to make these units as well because enemies are getting faster and there's a chance they'll lose the debuff before we can start to attack. And also the calculations for damage. Let's make it simple by giving A 300 attack with 80% crit damage, and his basic attack is 80% of attack stat. On crit, A deals 432 damage. Let's say enemy has 60 defense. Now the damage goes down to 372. Let's give A plus 100 attack and 10% damage bonus from Ting Yun, an action advance, 30% crit damage and 20% damage bonus from Sunday. A now deals 827 damage on crit. That's more than double A's original damage. Now let's give A two Nihility characters. Pella shreds enemy defense by 60%, and I don't know, someone gives vulnerability and gets 40% damage increase. Probably Cypher, so I'm gonna remove her ult because I'm trying to calculate A's damage. But anyway, now A deals 571 of damage on crit. That's 256 damage difference on a small scale. Imagine if the scale was higher. A could have dealt, I don't know, 400k with harmonies, but with Nihility, A would deal like 200. That's a huge difference. In most cases, buffing your allies has higher benefits towards the calculations than debuffs. I kinda realized this mid-editing that I didn't include light cones, so if you're not considering 5 stars, Harmony has a slight upper hand over Nihility. They got DDD and DDD. Well, jokes aside, Poised to Bloom is decent, Past and Future is a good cheap action adventure LC, heck even Dreamville Adventure has its uses. Nihility on the other hand has pretty much niche light cones. The best FTP options are before the tutorial mission starts, granted the wearer or someone in the team has a defense shred, and Resolution shines as Pearls of Sweats for an easy defense shred trigger. The other LC options are pretty much wearer damage increase, and the 5 stars are just niche gimmicks where they make their biz wearer 100% functional to their own gimmicks. You know, like Fugue having more break damage increase, something like that. Even when the LC is good, supportive wise, it's a 5 star. It's quite expensive Jade wise. Depending on the banner, you're better off getting the character over the LC. Since Honkai Star barely releases any units anyway and just spams 5 star characters, character value increases with their LC. Getting a 5 star Nihility light cone without a user is totally a waste of Jades. Well, unless you like the art and you don't care about meta, then it's whatever. Again, I'm not saying that these LCs shouldn't be this way, but it's because we lack any nihilistic units that we just don't release any shredding / vulnerability light cones other than Luca. But anyway, this is it for my ranting of Nihility characters. I'm probably not the first person to ever talk about this. All of these are just personal opinions. Feel free to open up your own discussion of said topic. I don't really care. There's probably some stuff I got wrong, like the calculations. I think they don't calculate it that way, but I think I'm right. I don't know, just correct me if you find anything. Anyway, thanks for watching an unemployed man ranting about a video game. Bye.